Welcome everybody to another edition of Blue Bear Quilts Live. We're part of the Designers Tips and Techniques virtual show, and today I'm going to be talking all about my favorite quilting tools. I'm sure that you will see something that you didn't know about today that you're absolutely going to fall in love with. So hopefully you'll like this video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up, give me a heart, give me a like, a share, and please share this video with your friends. So let's get started. I'd like to start off by showing you a couple of quilts and then the tools I use to design these quilts. The first one would be this one behind me that's called Rhythm of the Stars, and that was done with Cutie Fabrics Evolution Rhythm line. The next quilt is Pixie Party, and this is also done with Cutie Fabrics. And if you would be interested in making this quilt, there are kits that are for sale at Affinity for Quilts in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. That's a quilt shop in White Bear Lake, Minnesota called Affinity for Quilts, and they also have the rulers that would help you make this quilt. So I see April is watching from Arizona. Hi, April. The next quilt I want to show you today is called Modern Vivs, and this is also made with Cutie Fabrics. It's their Vivian line. And I have a feeling you're going to see this quilt again in a little bit. So I'm going to show you 20 of my favorite quilting tools. And the first one is this magnet that's called a Grabbit. And what's neat is you can turn it upside down and the pins do not fall out. And this one's a little more expensive. It might be like $30. So if you go to Harbor Freight, you basically can find the exact same thing, and I think it's either $5 or $10. And it also holds the pins so that they don't fall out. You can also use this to clean up metal things on the floor if you need to. So the next favorite thing, number 2, are these Clover Flower. They're Clover Flower head pins, and I absolutely love these because they're very long and thin, and they go into the fabric really easy, and they lay nice and flat so that as you're sewing they don't cause any bulk on your sewing machine. They're my absolute favorite pins for sewing with. Number 3 on my list are Clover Clips. They come in all these fun little colors, and they're just little clips that open and close like that. And I use these for a lot of things. I use them for holding blocks together as I'm making a quilt. I use them for holding fabric pieces together that go in a particular block. And my favorite thing for using them is binding, like sewing the binding on, because when you put these on the binding, they basically are a 1/4 inch, and so you'll know like if your binding is a 1/4 inch when you put these clips on. They're my favorite thing for doing binding, Clover Clips. Now this next one's kind of an unusual tool. This is a surgeon's tool. It's called a forceps, and I have several things that I like to use these for. When you have to take the needle plate off of your sewing machine and clean all those little woolly fuzzies out, you can actually take this and go down into the machine and very gently pull the fabric, you know, the little fabric fuzz and lint and all that out of the sewing machine. You can also use this like as a stiletto and grab a hold of a piece as it's going so that your finger doesn't go underneath the needle. And the edge of these are kind of serrated. They're made for holding on to things, and it's like a little tweezers. And I also use it when I'm doing quilting, like when you want to pull up the thread from the bottom. Sometimes it's hard to get those threads, so I use this to grab a hold of the thread and pull it up. So these are surgeon's forceps, and you can find these on Amazon. Number 5 would be my favorite scissors, and those are Kai scissors. They come in lots of different colors, like these black ones have extremely sharp blades, and they're great to use. I see Jude Fish is watching. Hi, Jude. And then these are purple ones, and they actually have like a serrated edge. So they're very good for cutting. I love these. And they're comfortable in your hand. They feel really good and they're nice and easy on your hand. And they come with these caps, which I like. And then of course, these smaller ones always lose little caps and it's hard to find. But I use these for embroidery because you can see that they're curved. And so as you're trying to snip the threads on your embroidery, you don't cut the fabric, you just cut the threads. So these are scissors by Kai, that's spelled K-A-I. Another one of my favorite cutting tools would be this purple thing. It's not the purple thing, but it's purple, and it's called the Cutting Gizmo. And what's neat about this is it has a little razor blade up here at the top that can be changed out. And when you do chain piecing, that's where you keep sewing pieces together on your sewing machine and you don't cut the threads in between. You end up with a big long line of pieces together that are being held by one piece of string, but you eventually have to cut those strings. And so you take and you put them over this cutter and you're able to cut all of those strings in between very quickly. So this is the Cutting Gizmo. Number 7 on our list happened to be from Quilter Select. And this is a Quilter Select ruler, and I love it because it has lots of lines on it and it also has lots of angled lines, so it's very handy. And I don't know if you can notice, but on the back it's also frosted. And so what that frosting does is when you lay the ruler on your fabric, it grabs your fabric and it's not going to slide around. Now the favorite rotary cutter that I like to use with those rulers is the Quilter Select rotary cutter. And this is fantastic because it has these nice rubber grips. It's very easy to hold in your hand. And hey Gil, I know you like the bear. I put him there just for you. And in order to make this rotary cutter work, you push on this button right here, and then you tap it on your cutting board, and it releases this the safety guide. And then when you're ready to close it, you just put it the opposite way and tap it, and it closes it. So it's a real easy way to put the safety on and off. And the weight of this makes cutting the fabric much easier. So this is the Quilter Select rotary cutter. Another cutting tool would be the Stripology Roller by Creative Grids. This ruler has lots of lines on it, lots of angles, and it has these little keyholes at the bottom. So you take your rotary cutter and you put it in these keyholes at the bottom, and then there's slits in the ruler, and you go up like that, and you lay your fabric folded along these lines so it gives you nice even strips. And at the bottom there are squares and stars, which make it really easy to cut out 1.5 inch strips and 2.5 inch strips, which I use a lot. So I love this ruler, the Stripology Ruler by Creative Grids. Hey Kelly and Lydia, how are you? Good to see you. Now number 9 on my list is a computer program. This is Electric Quilt. Now I know it says Electric Quilt 7, and they currently happen to be on Electric Quilt 8, but you download most things now, so I don't have a box for Electric Quilt 8. But this is what I use to design quilts, and many of you say, well, I'm not really interested in designing quilts. Why would I want to use this software? Well, what you can do with it is you can actually go to the fabric manufacturers' websites and you can download the latest fabrics. So an example of the latest fabric will be, I have a line with Cutie fabrics coming out in January called Cocoa Chic. But you can actually see the Cocoa Chic fabrics on the Cutie Fabrics website right now. So you could download those, you could put them into this program and start designing quilts or putting it into a pattern that you already have and see what the fabrics are going to look like in the quilt before you ever buy the fabric or ever make a cut. That's one advantage for quilters. And then the other one would be that, let's say that the pattern that you have has a 12-inch block, but you'd rather it be a 6-inch block because you want to make a smaller quilt. So basically changing the number in one place in this program, you can instantly change it, a pattern from a 12-inch block to a 6-inch block, and then it will print out the fabric requirements for you. So that's why this tool is so awesome for quilters, even if you're not a designer. Hey Ron, I'm glad you're watching. Good to see you. Now number 10 on my list, I like to use big heavy irons. And I like the weight of those irons because the weight helps do a good job of pressing, and steam normally does a good job. But I found that every time I put water in my expensive irons to create steam, eventually they start to rust, and then they get my pressing mat all gunked up, and they sometimes put rust stains on my fabrics, which I don't like. So I found these in a quilting store, and it's a water mister. And watch this. Oh, is that not just the coolest? You spray this water and it makes a nice fine mist of water, and it definitely gets your fabric wet enough that it will create steam when you're pressing your fabric. So these are sold in quilt shops, but if you can't find one, here's another tip. Go to the cleaning aisle of your grocery store and look for Febreze. I think the bottle is exactly the same thing, and you just dump out the Febreze and put water in, and you have one of these cool misters. Number 11 is this wooden presser. Sometimes when you're at your sewing machine, you don't want to get up all the time to press your fabric. So with this wooden presser that has like a little angle on it, you can take and finger press your pieces that you've just sewn, and then take this wooden press and press on top of your table and flatten the flatten the seam, and that way you don't even have to get up from your sewing machine when you want to sew another piece on. So this is a wooden presser, and you find this at Quilt in a Day. So another tool that's really handy while you're right by your sewing machine is this wool pressing mat. And you can see it kind of gets a little brown from pressing on it. It's a little nicer on the other side. But the reason why the wool mat is so handy is because when you press on wool, the heat reflects back. So you're getting heat from the top and you're getting heat from the back, which does a really good job of pressing your fabrics. But I like to have this right by my sewing machine for when I'm doing embroidery. I create a lot of the free patterns that you can download at Accuquilt.com, and some of them have applique in it. So in order to press the applique pieces onto the fabric when they're in the hoop, I use this little Clover mini iron, and I used it on this wool mat right next to my sewing machine. So I just take the hoop out of the sewing machine, lay it on this woolen mat, and then fuse the pieces down. So this is a woolen mat, and this is the Clover mini iron, two great applique tools. And then, of course, how could we talk about favorite tools without talking about one of these? This is a seam ripper, of course, but it's a lovely handmade wooden one. And what I like about these is it's just so nice to hold in your hands. It feels good. It has a nice weight to it. And so it's not such a chore to do seam ripping when you have something nice like this. And then on the other end, it has a stiletto, so it's a double purpose. And one other tip, I don't know if you know this about seam rippers, but at the end they have like a little red ball. And that red ball has a purpose. So if you have a long seam that you've sewn together and you want to rip it out, you take a couple stitches out on the end, and then you take this red ball and you put it inside the seam allowance. So in other words, the short side of, like, where it's sewn, there's like a long side of the fabric, and then there's the short 1/4 inch side. You take and you place this in between on the 1/4 inch side and lay the fabric flat on your desk and just push the seam ripper against the table, and it just goes just like that. It goes that quick. So there are videos that show how to do this on YouTube. You can look for one, and if not, I'll probably do one soon. But that's what that little red ball is for on the end of your seam ripper. Now when you're designing a quilt or sewing or cutting, you need to have good light. So this is a portable Ott-Lite. It's made by Ott-Lite, and you just lift it up like this and it has a light, and you can see that they're called True Color. And what that means is that it's actually like daylight. It would be as if you took your fabric outside and had daylight. And so the portability of this is awesome. I love Ott-Lite, and I actually have a couple of other floor Ott-Lites that are lighting up the studio today. So this is great for getting good light on your quilting projects. Now you have to get quilting inspiration when you're designing quilts and making quilts. So one place where I get those are quilting magazines. This one is called Fons and Porter's Quick and Easy Quilts. It happens to be the premier edition, and it has designers in it like Victoria Findlay Wolfe, Kimberly Jolly of the Fat Quarter Shop, and Mary Hertel. And you may also recognize the quilt that's on the cover. It's the one that I showed you at the very beginning. It's called Modern Vivs. But I love magazines like this because as you go through them, you'll get all kinds of inspiration for great projects to make and techniques to use. So magazines can be very good tools for quilting inspiration. This is probably my favorite book for inspiration. This is called The Quilter's Album of Patchwork Patterns, and it's by Jenny Beyer. Now I don't know if all of you are familiar with Jenny Beyer, but she is one smart cookie. And she has put all kinds of blocks in this book, and they're colored with her Jenny Beyer palette fabrics, and they're absolutely gorgeous. And how she's laid out the blocks in the book is they're done according to grids. So there might be like a 4 grid, a 6 grid, a 9 grid, a 12 grid. And what that does is it allows you to put blocks together. So if you take 2 blocks that are a 4 grid, they match up because they're the same size. Or you could take 2 4 grids and put them with an 8 grid and they would line up. So you can get all kinds of inspiration from a book like this. It's called The Quilter's Album of Patchwork Patterns by Jenny Beyer. And if this doesn't happen to be available, look for old editions of it. It's definitely worth it. That is my quilt that's on the cover of the magazine. Yep, absolutely, Ron. And so this was the quilt that I showed earlier. And that's Modern Vivs. So another block tool would be this one. It's called Ladies Art Company Block Tool. And inside here are all kinds of blocks. And it's also organized by grid. So when you have like a 4 grid, it'll match up with another 4 grid. Or if you have a 12 grid, it matches up with the 12 grid. And then in addition, they tell you how to cut all the pieces, and then they tell you like how much fabric you need if you're making a 3-inch block, a 6-inch block, a 9-inch block. And there's also some sewing tips in the back of this. So this can be a very good tool for inspiration. And with the grid system that's involved, it's easy to match blocks and put them together. Hey Brandy, hey Debbie. Then you also need to have color inspiration. And so for that, I use the 3-in-1 color tool by Joan Wolfram. And this is kind of like those palettes that you get in the paint department, you know, of a Lowe's or Home Depot. And so let's just take one of these colors. So we'll take red violet. There's 24 different colors. This one happens to be 14, red violet. And so what it shows you is it shows you the tints, the tones, the shades, that are all related to that particular color, red violet. Then on the back, it shows you what colors are analogous, what colors are split complementary, and what colors are triadic. So this tool can be very, very helpful when you're trying to decide what colors to use when you're making your quilts. That's the 3-in-1 color tool by Joan Wolfram. And then it helps to have a good basic palette of fabrics to work with when you're making quilts, because you always need solid colors. So this is a new line called Rapture. And just look at all those luscious colors that are in there. And this is by Cutie Fabrics, and it will be coming out in August. So this is a great line to have some basic color fabrics to go in your quilts. And now we also have to use our iPhones and iPads, and I'm going to be using an iPad, but these same apps that I'm going to show you are on an iPhone as well. And the first one I'm going to show you is this one that's called the Color Wheel app. This is what it looks like. And then it opens up and it shows you a color wheel. And then up here you can click and it'll show you what happens when you do the different tones and tints and shades. And then down here you can go and see what will be like the triadic, what will be analogous. So that's a great tool that you have probably on your phone for working with a color wheel. And the app is just called the Color Wheel, and this happens to be on an iPad. Then the other tool, this is my favorite app that I use all the time. I'll show you what it looks like. It looks like this little RK down here. It's called Robert Kaufman's Quilting Calculator. And the reason I use this all the time is you can calculate how much backing and batting you need, and you can calculate how much binding you need. So like for the backing, you just put in the measurements of the quilt, how much overage you would like, and then it tells you exactly how much fabric you need to buy. For the binding, you put in the size of the quilt, you can put in what size binding you want, like I might pick 2.5 inch, and then it tells you exactly how much binding fabric you need and how many strips you need to cut. So those are a couple of apps that are on your phone that's great. Now somebody asked what the quilt is behind me. That is Rhythm of the Stars. That's one of the patterns that's available on our website. So those are the 20 tools that I use, or 20 of my favorite tools that I use to design quilts. I hope you've seen something that you didn't see before that you liked. If you saw things that you liked, please share this video with your friends. And now, coming up next on the Designer's Tips and Techniques, which I hope you've enjoyed. There's been 3 days worth. It was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And if you missed any of them, you can go to the links that I have in my postings and click on any of them and go back to the Designer's Facebook pages, and you can watch the videos that have already occurred. But the very last one is coming up next at 8 o'clock Eastern Time in the United States, and it's somebody from down under. Can you believe it? What time is it in Australia right now? It must be tomorrow already. I don't know. But Raylene Beilenberg, I hope I pronounced that correct, from Sunflower Stitcheries and Quilting is coming up next at 8 o'clock. So I hope you'll go to her Facebook page and watch hers as well. And I hope you've enjoyed this, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.